Good morning. This is Mrs. Hunt, and today is Tuesday, the 10th, and this is AP Bio. So, first of all, for seniors, I think you all are seniors, make sure that you have contacted your counselor so that you can do the Apply for College Day on Wednesday. I know some of you are quarantined and some of you are online learners, so still contact your counselor and let them know that you want to be able to do that. The Apply to College Day, the fees are waived. So some of the colleges have an application fee for you to turn in your application, and those fees get waived, so you get to save some money on this day. Go ahead and apply to some colleges ahead of time. Go ahead and go to one of the ones that they recommend. This way you have a yes coming up, so that's great. Don't postpone it and wait too long. Also, FAFSA is being done every Friday. I think it's this Friday and next Friday, online, and quarantine kids, you still got to get your FAFSA done. So contact your counselor about how to do that, or if you have any questions about your FAFSA form. You have to get FAFSA in order to get the loans to go to college. Everybody does, even the most wealthy people. You still have to fill out your FAFSA because that determines your financial aid to school. So even if you don't need it or you do need it, everybody has to get FAFSA first, and then you can get accepted to your school. So make sure you're filling out your FAFSA form. It's very important. It's a little complicated, so if you have questions, then contact the counselor and they can be able to help you answer the questions. Okay, so this module is module 11. I have the starter here, which is just what we put on the board every day. So I thought I'd start putting it here so everybody could kind of see what we're doing each day. All right, we're in module 11. So here's my lesson plans for this week. I'm sorry I didn't get this video out earlier, but let's go back. So we're going to do today, we're going to do chapter 11, section 1 notes, and we're going to hopefully illustrate autocrine, juxtacrine, paracrine, and endocrine. I want you to draw a picture to represent those 4 things. You can easily Google this to represent these types of cell communication. It would be great if you were to make it unique, like be creative. Maybe you want to think about it as 2 stick figures passing a baton like a relay race, or somebody sending something in the mail. Of course, you can make it like cells too. I want you to add some color and turn that picture in. The next part we're going to do is chapter 11, sections 2 through 5. I'll post a separate video for that. And there's a bunch of videos on the AP Classroom that I'd like for you to watch. Tomorrow, Wednesday, we're going to do cell communication. There's a POGL to do, and there's some more videos to watch online. Thursday, we're going to do cell signaling basics. There's a reading worksheet and some questions to answer. And I did give you an extra credit opportunity to watch the video on Netflix. It's a pretty good one. And the octopus does a lot of the fight and flight reflex that you might be able to relate to this unit. At the end, we're going to do the assignment on chapter 11, that Pearson review. All right, so let's get started on our notes. So chapter 11. So this is just going to be chapter 11, section 1. Okay, cell communication. All right, cells can signal to each other and interpret signals they receive from other cells and the environment. It's kind of crazy to think about a cell talking to another cell. Hey, do you have any extra glucose? I could use that. Hey, I need this amino acid to build this protein. Do you have it over there? Okay, send it over here. It's kind of crazy. Signals are most often chemicals that are going to move. So that makes us remember chemical signals. Which of the 4 macromolecules is that? Should have guessed protein. Proteins are usually those chemical signals, and enzymes are proteins. So a lot of times enzymes are moving and receiving these signals. The same small sets of cell signaling mechanisms show up in diverse species and processes. So this kind of gives us an idea of the possibility of evolution. So there's a theory that we all evolved from that single-celled organism, and over billions of years, we've gone from a small unicellular to a multicellular to a eukaryote to protist to plant to fungi to animal and so on. It would have taken billions of years for all that to happen. So that's just an idea. When we see that there are similarities in bacteria and all species that we do in our own body, it kind of supports that theory. You could say that we evolved from that single-celled creature, or you could think of it as some kind of master plan that is put into place. Any way you view it, but that shows a possibility of evolution. Okay. All right, here we have an impala and a cheetah. This impala is talking about that fight and flight reflex. So it's having an adrenaline rush because it's being attacked and it's going to be killed. So right now, we see a physical response triggering a chemical response in the body. So the impala feels threatened. It sees a predator. This is going to cause the liver to actually start to break the fat that's in the liver down. The glycogen that's in the liver is going to start to fall apart and break apart. And it's going to turn into sugar. And it's going to flood the bloodstream with sugar because the liver is so huge and it's attached to so many blood vessels. So it floods the bloodstream with sugar. It also is going to trigger the adrenal gland to make epinephrine or adrenaline. It's the same thing, epinephrine and adrenaline. And this adrenaline is going to pump through and bring a lot of phosphorus into the cells. So what are we going to be doing? Hopefully you guessed cellular respiration and ATP synthesis. So this is an adrenaline rush. I've linked a couple videos about adrenaline. And this triggers that fight or flight reflex. So the impala is either going to fight for its life or flee. When you get an adrenaline rush, a lot of your other senses close off. Blood vessels will open up so more blood can flow through. The eyes will become dilated and opened up even bigger to allow more light to come in. Sound gets turned down. You become more focused on something. Sometimes people in fight or flight reflexes do things that are bizarre, like they run away from like their family, like they leave their children and run away from a predator, and they're not thinking clearly. They're just thinking of their own lives and trying to save their life. So you ran away from a bear, but you left your kid. Sometimes adrenaline rushes cause people to lift cars off of people who have been crushed under a car. And you think, how does this happen? But that's that pumping of extra energy, extra sugar, extra oxygen into the body. Usually after an adrenaline rush, you pass out. You're exhausted. You start shaking and you're fatigued, afterwards. And you can't just trigger it again to come back through. So that's pretty neat to think of a message being sent, received, and then a response coming through. Okay, there's the epinephrine or adrenaline molecule. So they're the same thing. If you've ever heard of an EpiPen before, that's just pure adrenaline that's going to be pumped into your body. External signals are converted into responses within the cell. So communication among microorganisms provides some insight on how cells send, receive, and respond to signals. So we're going to look at bacteria and we're going to look at fungi, some simple-celled organisms. This one right here is yeast. So we see that yeast does asexual reproduction, which is budding. So you have one yeast and he pinches and makes a new bud off of him, and that is the identical clone. But sometimes yeast reproduce sexually. And what's the benefit of sexual reproduction? Hopefully you guessed biodiversity, having a diversity in the gene pool, and that chance for evolution, for a trait that's more beneficial to be passed on. So there are not male, female of yeast, but there is A and alpha types of yeast. And they can use chemicals to signal between them. Like, hey, do you want to reproduce? Hey, are you an alpha? Are you an A? We're opposite, so let's reproduce. And we're going to have a series of steps called the transduction pathway. So you're going to see this word signal transduction pathway a lot. And that just means that a signal is created, it's passed down to be received, and then a response is happening afterwards. Molecular details of signal transduction in yeast are similar to mammals. So we're able to see how yeast does it and then relate it to us and how our body does these pathways. So here you have the A and the alpha, and they're reproducing, sexually mating, and then we have a genetic recombination of the offspring. Ancestral signaling molecules likely evolved in prokaryotes and single-celled organisms, and eukaryotes were adapted for the use of multicellular descendants. So that's that evolution again. Cell signaling is critical among prokaryotes. Why? Because they can't talk. They can't communicate with each other. So instead, they're going to signal by a chemical something is happening. All right, the next part is called quorum sensing. And quorum sensing is pretty cool. A concentration of signaling molecules allow bacteria to sense a local population density in a process called quorum sensing. So the bacteria can sense when their population starts to get a little bigger, and they can plan an attack. So here's some teeth, and the redness here is caused by bacteria, and this is going to be a gingivitis infection here in the bacteria. So what happens, bacteria lives on your teeth and it lives in your gums, and when you brush your teeth, you're disrupting it and killing them off. But if you don't brush good, or maybe you don't floss your teeth, then that bacteria will get together and group together. And then they figure out how many of them are there. And then they plan their attack together. Like, let's eat this part right here. And so they all group together and attack one spot. And they start to eat away at the gum, or they eat away in the tooth. That gives you a cavity, or leads to gum disease, which is gingivitis. The idea that prokaryotic bacteria can talk to each other and plan an attack is pretty cool and scary at the same time. All right, here's a rod-shaped bacteria, and this is billions of bacteria in this picture. This was an electron microscope. You can see that they get together and they start to create this thing called a biofilm, and they're congregating in here. They're aggregating in this area. And they're making this biofilm as like a layer of protection around them. And then here you can see that these bacteria have grouped into these little spores. So there's billions of them in that one little pocket. And they have a little protection around them. They're hoping to explode, and then that will pop and push them out to spread to other things. But the idea that they can sense how big they are, and that they can make this biofilm around them in order to be visible to see a bacteria, groups of bacteria right there, is pretty cool. So this is that quorum sensing, and then of course that biofilm. Okay. An example of quorum sensing is the formation of biofilm. Biofilm is an aggregation of bacterial cells adhering to a surface. Another example of medical importance is the secretion of toxins by infectious bacteria. So this, we're talking about like a staph bacteria, Staphylococcal bacteria. Staph infections, staph lives on your skin. It's around surfaces all the time, and it usually doesn't cause any problems until the staph gets under your skin. When the bacteria gets under your skin, it will start asexual reproduction, budding and pinching and growing. But when the population gets to be a certain size, they're quorum sensing, and says, hey, we're big enough to do some damage. Then they start to secrete a toxin or an enzyme. That enzyme causes the cells around it to break apart and fall apart. So whatever it's eating, so it can absorb the nutrients. But they do it all at the same time. So it's like all of their toxins can congregate and work together. This is bad for us if we get a staph infection in a wound. It can grow very severe, very fast. and become very swollen very quickly. There is antibiotic-resistant staph bacteria, and that can get very scary because a little bit of that bacteria in you can reproduce very quickly. In some cases, the skin or the material has to be cut out of the body and removed, which is a bit scary. Interfering with the signaling pathway used in quorum sensing may be a promising approach as an alternative to antibiotic treatment. So this is kind of exciting that maybe in the future, as you get older, maybe your children, as crazy as that sounds, won't take an antibiotic if they get sick, but they'll take a signaling interfering pathway treatment, and that will stop the bacteria from quoruming. It'll stop the bacteria from signaling each other and talking to each other. It's just a different way to approach treatment of an infection. As we get more and more antibiotic-resistant bacteria, there's something we'll have to change with how we treat with antibiotics. Local and long-distance signaling. Cells in multicellular organisms communicate via signaling molecules. In local signaling, animal cells may communicate by direct contact. Animal and plant cells have cell junctions that directly connect the cytoplasm to adjacent cells. So we're going to look at this in a minute. Here you can see the two cells are close together right here. Here's a junction, and they're talking to each other. So one cell's right next to each other, and messages can pass from one to the next and to the next. Signaling substances in the cytosol can pass freely between the adjacent cells. So this is more of a local type of signaling. So here we have in animal cells gap junctions that are between animal cells that allow them to communicate. In plant cells, we have something called plasmodesmata cells. The plasmodesmata is a little pathway between, not a plasmodesmata cell, plasmodesmata like tube that goes between the cells and allows for communication. That's about all we know for plant cells of how they communicate. We don't know much about plant cells communication, but we know that they have those little plasmodesmatas that allow them to communicate between here. So when we talk about cell recognition, some cells can bind into other cells and even have a receptor. So here's the purple receptor and then the green signaling. So when the green binds into the receptor, it triggers a chemical response inside of the next cell. So that's, again, close proximity communication. In other cases, animal cells communicate using secreted messengers, and they travel only short distances. So these were like direct contact, touching each other. All right, the next one is secreting a chemical. Growth factors, which stimulate nearby target cells to grow and divide, are one class of such local regulators in animal cells. We're going to look at next chapter. Right now we're in the unit cell communication. And we're going to be in this through mitosis and meiosis in the next chapters. So I'm hoping that our understanding of how cells communicate will give us better ideas of how they communicate to grow and build a new cell. And that should be mitosis and meiosis. All right, this type of local signaling in animal cells is called paracrine signaling. So here's paracrine. It's one of the pictures I want you to draw. And you can see that the messages are traveling from one cell to the next cell. And you can see the messages are chemical messages coming from one to the next. So these could be a protein or an enzyme that are being passed between here. Autocrine is when a cell delivers a message to itself. It sounds kind of funny. But what if I was to make a protein inside? So the nucleus codes for the protein. It goes to that mRNA, travels to the endoplasmic reticulum, builds a protein. I send the protein out of the cell, and then it comes back in, and it hits a receptor inside that starts another process on the inside. So if the cell gives it back to itself, that's called autocrine. If the cell's passing it to another one, that's called paracrine. Synaptic signaling also happens and occurs in the nervous system with neurotransmitters are released in response to electric signals. So here's a nerve cell right here. Nerve cells look a little funny. The nucleus and all the parts are in here, but they have these long things called axons that not connect directly, but close to the next nerve cell. And dendrites allow the branching to come off of here. This is why messages travel really quickly. In between the cells, you have this area right here. So here is one cell that's receiving a message, and here's another one that has passing it on. So this is the chemical message, little blue balls that are coming out, and they're being received in the next cell. So once it hits and fits, and this is very much like an enzyme, like a lock and key, specific proteins or enzymes that are being sent out here, specific chemical signals are being sent to specific receptors that are triggering another thing on the inside. Drugs to treat depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder often disrupt the signals passing through here. And that was from the textbook. I thought that was pretty interesting. Local signaling in plants is not well known other than the plasmodesmata. Plasmodesmata is the thin channel right here between that plant cell. Okay. All right, long distances, and this is the endocrine signaling, another one I want you to draw. Long distance signaling in plants and animals are using hormones. So this is going to use the endocrine system. The endocrine system is all the glands in your body. So I've given you a picture of several glands of the endocrine system. You have the pineal gland and the pituitary gland that are in the brain. Those are in charge of growth and I can't remember what the pineal gland is in charge of. I want to say it's your anger issues. You have your thyroid gland, which is in your neck. It's like right here. It's a butterfly shape right down here. The thyroid gland helps you store fat. If you have a hyperthyroid, you don't store fat on your body. You could be really, really malnourished and skinny. If you have a hypothyroid, it can cause you to gain excessive weight and store too much on your body. All of a sudden, you've gained 40 pounds. So thyroid problems can lead to thyroid cancer too. And this is going to be sent to all over your body. I think that's big to think that it travels long distances. It's going to go in the bloodstream. Your adrenal gland is right here on the kidney. The pancreas is right here. Your ovaries and testes are responsible for your estrogen or testosterone for development, for your secondary sex characteristics. So it's crazy to think about these glands in your body being sent signals throughout your whole body and sending those messages to your whole body. All right, so here again is the paracrine being cell to cell. Here's that synaptic signaling between the nerve cells. And here's the endocrine being passed in the blood. So there it goes again. Okay. This is the last slide I'm going through today. The 3 stages of the cell signaling. Earl Sutherland and colleagues discovered how hormone epinephrine acts on cells. Epinephrine stimulates the breakdown of storage of polysaccharide glycogen within liver cells. So polysaccharides are a sugar in the liver cells and skeletal muscles, and the breakdown releases the sugar glucose for energy production. Sutherland suggested that cells receiving signals went through 3 processes, and go ahead and memorize it. A signal reception, a signal transduction, and then a cellular response. So you receive some message, then you process it. And I'll pull out some paper because you know I love to draw. Okay, so if this is my cell, and here is the chemical message. So here's that receptor. He looks like a Y. Now, really receptors, if you go back to your cell membrane and we draw about those cell membrane and the plasma membrane, let me draw real quick. Okay. You remember the plasma membrane? You remember these transport proteins? Well, these transport proteins, some of them are very much like that, but they are the receptors. And they're going to receive something very specific, like an enzyme fitting a specific, a substrate fitting a specific enzyme. It's like a lock and key. And this will trigger something to happen inside the cell. So a lot of times they draw them looking like this, where you can see the molecule moving in to the receptor, and then something will happen on the inside. So here is our reception, and then it coming inside and triggering a response inside is the transduction. Now, real quick, you remember the nucleus is going to make the mRNA. Remember transcription and translation? All right, the mRNA comes out and it goes to a ribosome, and the ribosome builds the protein. Okay, so if you remember, the mRNA comes out of the nucleus. So basically, the signal travels to the nucleus. Ooh, there we go. The nucleus makes the mRNA from what protein that needs to happen. The mRNA, that's transcription, comes out to the ribosome. The ribosome builds the protein, that's translation. This protein is going to then leave the cell, and where does it go? If it's paracrine, it's going local, it's going next door. If it's endocrine, it's passing in the bloodstream, going very far. So the response that happens is after. So you kind of have to be thinking about it, receiving a signal, doing something with the signal, and then responding to that signal. That's basically what we talked about. So you have four, and I've got them on the lesson plan, cell communication. Okay, we have autocrine, I'm looking at my board to rewrite them. They are also in the lesson plans. Okay, so our four cell communication, autocrine, juxtacrine we didn't really talk about, but you can Google these and find some easy things to draw, paracrine and endocrine. So you need to write their definition or explain it in your own words, draw a picture to represent them, and add some color. Now you can take a picture of it and insert it in the Google Doc that I have. I'll take a grade on this, a little classwork grade. It should be pretty easy. If you Google the cell communication types, you will find something very easy. You can either do it like drawing a picture of the cell, just basically what the picture has on the computer, or if you want to make it creative and think about stick figures or a sport analogy or something else, then that would be great. That would allow you to process it a little better. All right, I will make another video for sections 2 through 4 later today and post that one too. I hope you're having a great day and I hope you have a good week. It's supposed to rain this afternoon, so stay dry.